You've spent your whole life thinking you were abandoned, but the truth is, no one ever chose you in the first place. You weren't forgotten. You were never important enough to remember. That's what my sister said, right in front of everyone, and no one objected. My mother simply set down her glass and sighed. We gave you chances, but you always find a way to make things uncomfortable. And that's when I knew. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had chosen to erase me from their story. If you've ever been pushed out of your own family's narrative, compared, blamed, or silenced just because you weren't who they wanted, stay with me. Because this story is for those of us who were treated like the problem, instead of part of the family. The air outside the Warren estate was humid and still, the kind of thick silence that settled before a storm. Inside, the mood wasn't much different. Stale grief mingled with polished perfection. The overcast sky cast a silver sheen on the marble floors, and the cold, polished silverware laid out for a reception that no one really cared about. I hadn't been back here in 3 years. Not since the Thanksgiving where Mom said I should be more like Sam. Not since I realized that trying to belong in this family meant handing over every shred of myself. Today, I was here for Grandpa. Or at least, what was left of him. His name engraved on a mahogany box and a family gathering full of strategic condolences. Sam was already there, glowing in her ivory dress like she'd walked out of a New England bridal catalog. Mom and Dad hovered near her, proud smiles fixed like mask glue. I watched from the corner of the parlor, the one nearest the liquor cart. No one looked at me. Not really. Aunt Maureen nodded stiffly. Cousin Dean gave a brief, uncertain smile before drifting off with someone more politically useful. The rest whispered and grazed over hors d'oeuvres like actors waiting for their cues. Grandpa once handed me a small wooden box and said, "If they ever try to erase you, open this." I hadn't thought about it in years, until today. Thank you all for coming. Robert Ellis's voice cracked through the noise like an old phonograph. He stood in the center of the room, paper in hand, glasses low on his nose. Per Mr. Harold Warren's final will and testament. Everyone hushed, the moment sinking in like cold water. I moved a little closer. All physical gold assets, including coins, bullion, and bars, are to be transferred in entirety to Sam Warren. What? There was no pause, no mention of shared inheritance, no trust division, just a single line. Then Robert folded the paper. I blinked, but no one else reacted. Not Mom, not Dad, not Sam. They looked prepared. "Excuse me," I said, stepping forward. "There must be more. That can't be the whole—" Mom cut in, her tone sweet as venom. "Emily, don't embarrass yourself. This is neither the time nor the place." A couple of gasps. An uncle coughed to mask it. I heard my name whispered in jagged tones, disrespectful, estranged, bitter. I turned to Robert, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Not yet. Back in the hallway, I leaned against the paneled wall, dizzy. The room spun in beige and gold. They had done it. Rewritten him. Rewritten us. "Miss Warren." A voice rasped near my elbow. "Robert Ellis. What you were told today may not be the whole truth." I turned sharply, but he was already walking away, coat folded neatly over his arm. The words crawled under my skin and sat there, burning. I walked upstairs, heartbeat hollow in my chest, down the corridor that used to be mine. The wallpaper hadn't changed. Neither had the feeling, the one that told me I'd never fully belong here. My old bedroom smelled faintly of cedar and dust. I opened the closet, reached up behind the shelf. Nothing. I tried the drawer in the desk. Empty. Panic scratched at my throat. I tore open every drawer, every crevice. The wooden box was gone. You can't miss someone who chose to forget you, but the wound still aches when it rains. The storm rolled in quietly, like most of the big changes in my life. Rain traced soft lines down the kitchen window while the smell of cinnamon toast curled into the corners of our little home. Lily shrieked with laughter as Evan launched a spoonful of cereal across the table. I didn't even flinch. This was our chaos. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for it. Daniel stepped around the mess, coffee in hand, and kissed the top of my head. 5 years old and already acting like they own the place. I smiled into my tea. They do, we just pay the bills. This wasn't the life I had imagined when I left Hartford behind. It wasn't the one I was told I was throwing away either. But here in the Jersey suburbs, tucked into our 2-bedroom house with chipped molding and a backyard that could barely fit a grill, I had found something that didn't exist in my parents' mansion. Peace. After the funeral, there had been no letters, no calls, just one last voicemail from my mother. Consider this your release from the family. Don't come back. That was it. Like closing a door and bricking it shut. And for a while, I believed her. I built a life outside those walls. I met Daniel at a community coding workshop in Newark. He taught JavaScript like it was a love language, and I corrected his grammar like it was a moral obligation. Our wedding was a barefoot affair under a park gazebo with 3 friends and a grocery store cake. I wore a dress I'd altered myself. Daniel cried during the vows. No one from my family came. Not that we invited them. When the twins arrived, I was already deep into freelance work, balancing late-night feedings with bug fixes and CSS tweaks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. We didn't have heirlooms, but we had Saturday pancake rituals and dandelion bouquets from the backyard. Still, grief had its ways. It didn't knock. It lingered. Every so often, it crept in through the edges of my screen. Sam, posing in some high-rise bar, holding a gold-rimmed flute in one hand and wearing Grandpa's lion head cuff on the other. Or their family Christmas card on a yacht, Mom's necklace glinting like victory. I never commented. I never messaged. But I saw. And some nights when the rain hit just right, I remembered the box that vanished. The look in Grandpa's eyes when he gave it to me. The ache never went away. It just learned to stay quiet. Then came the voicemail. It was a Tuesday. I had just finished a client call when my phone buzzed with a missed call from an unknown number. The voicemail was 30 seconds long, static-laced, the voice warped, genderless, mechanical. They didn't file all the documents, look deeper. Not all of it was legal. That was it. No name, no context. But something about the tone lodged in my chest like a sliver. Daniel replayed it 3 times. This could be nothing, he said. Or it could be someone trying to start something. But I couldn't let it go. My mind reeled through every memory. The funeral, Robert's cryptic warning, the way Mom shut me down like she'd rehearsed it. What documents? What wasn't legal? Days passed. I tried to let it go. Focused on the twins, on deadlines. Life resumed its usual hum. Then came the invitation. It was from Lily and Evan's school. A charity fundraiser gala, very proper, very over the top for a preschool. But Daniel's company was listed as a partner, and we got 2 passes. I didn't even know we were sponsoring this, he said, holding up the glossy card. That's when I saw it, printed in gold cursive at the bottom under the major donors, the Warren Family Foundation. I dropped the card like it burned. Daniel furrowed his brow. Emily? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered out of instinct. Static. Then her voice. Emily? My mother. After 8 years, when the people who buried you come knocking, they're never there to say sorry, only to reclaim what they think is theirs. The knock came just as the wind picked up, scattering the twins' sidewalk chalk across the porch like pastel confetti. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, expecting a neighbor or maybe a package. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a delivery or a friendly face. It was them. Margaret stood poised, a smile stretched too tight across her face. She held a plastic bag filled with toys. Blocks, puzzles, a doll Lily had outgrown 2 years ago. Beside her, Thomas adjusted his collar like it was a courtroom tie. Emily, my mother said, with the same tone she used when I was 12 and tracked mud through her white foyer. Look at you. I didn't move. What are you doing here? We were in the area, Thomas added, stepping forward slightly. Thought we'd drop by, say hello, maybe see the kids. Daniel appeared behind me, silent. His presence was enough. I didn't invite them in. They're asleep? I said. School tomorrow. Margaret glanced past me into the hallway. They must be beautiful. We've missed so much. I didn't answer. I didn't owe them nostalgia. Why now? A pause. Then Thomas cleared his throat. We were hoping to reconnect. The past's behind us, right? Families drift, but we can mend fences. I almost laughed. Mending fences would have required there to be one left standing. I'm not sure you remember, I said evenly, but you made it very clear I wasn't part of this family anymore. I've lived with that. What changed? Margaret looked to Thomas, who gave her a slight nod. Sam, she started, her voice oddly flat, has decided not to have children. There it was, the angle. I should have seen it coming. We thought, Thomas continued, maybe we could be part of your children's lives. Start fresh, for their sake. Or for yours, I said. They didn't answer. I stepped out onto the porch, shutting the screen door behind me. The wind picked up again, pulling a curtain loose from the window. What do you want? I asked directly. Thomas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Heavy cream paper. My name scrawled in elegant cursive across the front. We've been revisiting Grandpa's estate, he said. The Warren Trust is being reactivated. Some things came up you might want to look at. I didn't take the envelope. And this has nothing to do with your daughter deciding not to provide you with an heir? Margaret stiffened. We just want what's best for everyone. Number, you want control. You want to rewrite things again like you did at the funeral. I don't know what you think happened. I know exactly what happened. I was erased, cut out, lied to. Daniel stepped closer now, resting a hand on the door frame. Calm, but alert. I suggest you leave, he said quietly. Thomas placed the envelope on the porch railing. Just read it, he said. That's all we're asking. I watched them walk down the path, Margaret's heels clicking too fast, too sharp. They didn't look back. I waited until their car disappeared around the corner before picking up the envelope. Inside was a single document. At the top, voluntary waiver of inheritance rights. Below that, in ink I'd never touched, was my signature. Some lies are loud. Others are hidden in legal footnotes and signed in your name without you knowing. The rain tapped a steady rhythm against the tall, narrow window as I stepped into the law office that had once smelled like cigar smoke and old velvet. Now, it just smelled like dust and faded legacy. Robert Ellis looked up from a stack of disorganized folders, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. Emily, he said, as if I were a ghost he'd hoped would stay buried. I didn't return the greeting. I placed the forged waiver on his desk without a word. He studied it for only a second before his face tightened. His fingers traced the signature, not like a lawyer verifying ink, but like a man trying to wake up from a mistake that never stopped haunting him. I never signed this, I said. And you know it. He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I was told, you refused your inheritance, that you walked away. I laughed once. Dry. Told by whom? Thomas, your father. He made it very clear I was to stay out of family matters. There was talk of defamation lawsuits. I didn't push. His voice cracked, barely audible. I should have. My eyes didn't move. You knew my grandfather. You knew what he wanted. He didn't reply. I want the truth, I said. Robert stood slowly and shuffled to a wall of file boxes, labeled in faded Sharpie. Warren Estate, wills, active and archived, trust clauses. He pulled one free, laid it on the table, and opened it with a sigh that sounded more like penance. He handed me a document. The original will, yellowed but intact. It read, "To my granddaughters, Sam and Emily, equal shares of all family gold and heirlooms. Should either party reject or disclaim their portion, said portion shall be liquidated and fund a perpetual scholarship in Emily's name at Hartford High." I blinked. This changes everything. He nodded. "It was never supposed to be hidden. Your grandfather filed this months before he passed. But after his death, Thomas pushed a new narrative." "And the waiver?" Robert looked down. "I've never seen it in any legal registry. It wasn't notarized. But the signature? It was enough to silence questions, enough to remove your name from the narrative." I clenched my jaw. "You let them." I was scared. He said it with shame that made me want to scream. "Your father is a powerful man, and I was an aging lawyer with too many bills and not enough spine." I folded the will and tucked it into my bag. "I need your help," I said. "You know the paper trail. You can testify." He hesitated, hands trembling. "Emily, you owe him that much," I added. "You said he trusted you." Silence. Then, "I should have done this 8 years ago." The room seemed to exhale with him. For the first time in a decade, the walls didn't feel like they were closing in. He stood again, reached into another box, and handed me a folded piece of paper. "A clause in the trust. You need to see this." The font was small, but the words rang loud. "In the event that either beneficiary becomes a parent, the trust must undergo a mandatory audit and public reaffirmation." So when I had my kids, he nodded. They had to move fast, quiet the paperwork, redirect the narrative before the audit clock started ticking. I sat back in the leather chair, stunned. They were never just trying to forget me. They were trying to erase me. Before anyone else noticed, I was never supposed to be gone. Robert leaned forward. "Are you prepared to bring this public? Because if you are, I'll stand beside you." I didn't answer right away. The hum of fluorescent lights mingled with the patter of rain. I pulled out my phone, fingers cold as I scrolled through unread notifications. Then one popped up. "Warren Family Trust to be honored at Public Education Gala, June 15th, Hartford Arts Center." If they wanted applause, I'd give them an audience. But the spotlight? That's mine now. The auditorium buzzed with the soft clatter of programs, murmurs of local donors, and the tapping heels of staff preparing for a night of praise and polish. Banners reading, "Warren Legacy for Education," draped the stage, backlit in warm amber. Rows of students, alumni, reporters, and community leaders filled the room in anticipation of a carefully scripted celebration. Except this time, the script was mine. Daniel gave my hand one last squeeze before I stepped behind the curtain. I could feel the pulse in my fingertips. The USB drive nestled in my palm like a match waiting for a strike. In the front row, Margaret and Thomas Warren sat composed, Margaret's pearl necklace shimmering under the lights. Thomas adjusting his cufflinks like a man ready to receive a standing ovation. Sam sat between them, her expression unreadable, chin lifted like she was born for spotlights. She didn't know what was coming. "Expose them where they expect you to stay quiet." Uncle Henry's voice echoed in my mind, grainy but clear, from that voicemail I had saved and backed up a dozen times. "And now," the MC announced, smiling at the crowd, "please welcome our final speaker for the evening, Emily Warren, alumna of the class of 2008 and a shining example of perseverance and progress." The applause was polite. Curious, not yet clued in. I walked across the stage with the calm of someone who had waited 8 years for this walk. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. "It's an honor to be here tonight. The Warren Foundation has long spoken of education as a legacy, one meant to uplift, to empower, to include." Another round of affirming nods. A local journalist scribbled on a notepad. "But legacies," I continued, "are only as honest as the people who write them." I paused, turned toward the projector screen, and inserted the USB drive. The room dimmed as the first slide appeared, my grandfather's original will, complete with the sharp clarity of legal typeface and a signature in his unmistakable hand. "This is my grandfather's last valid will," I said. "It clearly states that the family's gold assets and heirlooms were to be split equally between his two granddaughters, Sam and me." Whispers broke out like wind rustling through dry leaves. "Now, this," I clicked to the second slide, "is what was presented 8 years ago to the family and the estate attorney. A voluntary waiver of inheritance signed in my name. Except, I never signed it." I clicked again. The next slide showed a side-by-side comparison. My actual signature on legal documents versus the one on the so-called waiver. The differences were stark, highlighted with forensic notations. I didn't have to say more. The image said it all. Gasps punctuated the silence. Robert Ellis, sitting stage left, stood up and walked into the light. He looked older now, but composed. "As the Warren family's legal representative at the time, I can confirm the will you just saw was the one on file. This waiver," he gestured to the slide, "was never legally recorded. I was misled into silence, and I regret that deeply." The silence was gone. Tension cracked through the auditorium like thunder. My parents sat frozen. Thomas blinked, slow and tight. Margaret clutched her pearls with fingers that trembled. "I was told to stay away," I said, stepping closer to the edge of the stage. I was cut out not because I walked away, but because they wanted to erase me before the truth had a chance to breathe. I pointed to the screen once more. This lie was orchestrated, but more than that, it was strategic, because a clause in that same trust mandates a public audit once any beneficiary has children. Gasps again. "I have children," I said, my voice breaking slightly but holding firm, which meant the clock was ticking. So they moved to bury the documents, the truth in me. But I'm still here. A few flashes from cameras began. A woman in the third row raised her phone. "I don't need their gold," I said, turning toward my parents. "But I will not let my children inherit a lie." Margaret stood suddenly, her heels clacking sharply on the wooden floor. "This is not the time or place." "It's exactly the time," I said, locking eyes with her. "And the perfect place." She opened her mouth again, but I didn't let her speak. "Your legacy ends here." The room erupted. Journalists surged forward. Flashes blinded the stage. Someone in the audience shouted, "Is this true, Mrs. Warren?" And all the cameras turned on her. Thomas tried to rise but was blocked by the chaos. Sam's face had gone pale. She didn't speak. Daniel was there, waiting for me at the stairs. I took his hand as I stepped down from the stage, the buzz of the room collapsing behind me like the final curtain falling. And then I felt a hand on my arm. I turned. Sam's eyes were wide, glassy. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it's just a locked door and peace behind it. The garden smelled of thyme and honey. Sunlight slipped lazily through the leaves of the maple trees while Lily and Evan chased each other barefoot across the lawn. Daniel refilled glasses with lemonade, the clink of ice adding a subtle soundtrack to their first peaceful Sunday in what felt like years. Emily watched from her spot at the patio table, hands warm around her mug, the steam rising like the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the gala. 1 week had passed. 1 week since she'd walked off that stage and chosen not vengeance, but truth. She'd spent most of the following days navigating paperwork and quiet resolutions. A new lawyer, one she trusted, had drafted the final documents. Margaret and Thomas would never again have access to her children. Emily signed the injunction without trembling. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gardening, pruning a diseased branch so the rest might thrive. A package had arrived the day before, small and wrapped in tissue paper. No return address, just her name written in elegant, slanted print. Inside was Grandma's bracelet, the one Sam used to flaunt in curated selfies. Along with it was a note only 3 lines long. "I don't expect forgiveness. but it never belonged to me. S. Emily didn't cry. She didn't even shake. She just folded the note and tucked it into her keepsake drawer, next to the photo of her and Grandpa feeding ducks by the pond. Today was about beginnings, the first brunch of what she hoped would become tradition. Friends trickled in with casseroles and folding chairs, a few neighbors, two fellow mothers from the support group she'd started last fall. And just before noon, the mail carrier dropped off a manila envelope, addressed in thick block letters she didn't recognize until she opened it. The letterhead was familiar. Henry Warren, her uncle, once a silent shareholder, now a quiet ally. The note was simple but heavy. Dear Emily, you did what I never could. You didn't just confront them. You made it public. Thank you for giving our family's name a chance to mean something real again. I've added my statement to the investigation. Whatever comes next, I believe in you. Henry. She folded that letter more carefully than the last, tucked it beside Grandpa's note in the little wooden box, now returned and kept locked in her closet. She'd found it in a thrifted book on estate law. Grandpa, always thinking 10 steps ahead. By mid-afternoon, the kids were sprawled on a picnic blanket under the tree. Daniel beside them, eyes closed, half listening. Emily brought over a slim, hand-bound book covered in soft blue linen. She'd written it over the last 2 nights, pouring memories and metaphors into every page. She opened the book, cleared her throat, and began. Once there was a girl who lived in a house full of mirrors, but none of them showed her face. Lily nestled into her arm. Evan curled around her ankle, yawning. Daniel opened one eye and smiled. She read each page slowly, letting the rhythm of her voice match the gentle rustling of the wind. She read of shadows cast by praise that wasn't meant for her, of empty chairs at birthdays, of a girl learning to hear her own voice. Then came the last page. But she remembered herself. She closed the book. The wind stilled. The garden, for a moment, felt like it held its breath. She didn't need a stage. Not anymore. She had a story, and an audience that mattered. She was once the girl erased from the story, quietly removed from family photos, inheritance documents, and even dinner conversations. But when the world tried to forget her, she chose not to forget herself. What they saw as absence, she transformed into foundation. In the silence of exile, she learned to listen. To her doubts, to her anger, to her unwavering sense that something had gone deeply wrong. The journey to justice did not unfold in the form of courtroom drama or grandiose headlines. It grew slowly, through forensic handwriting reports, locked filing cabinets, a wooden box passed down from a grandfather who had seen the future in his granddaughter's eyes. It took shape through small decisions, a lawyer choosing truth over silence, an uncle choosing to speak after decades of complicity, and a mother choosing her children over the comfort of being liked. When Emily stepped onto that auditorium stage, she didn't seek revenge. She sought recognition of what was stolen, what was forged, what was deliberately buried. She didn't need applause. She needed air. And when she showed the world the 2 wills, the real and the false, the room didn't explode in anger. It inhaled. It paused. It saw. That moment changed everything. Not just for her, but for those watching. For daughters long silenced by family expectations. For sons raised in the shadows of golden siblings. For anyone ever told that loyalty matters more than truth. Justice in her case was not loud. It didn't end with handcuffs or lawsuits. It ended with boundaries. Firm, legally protected, emotionally unshakable. It ended with legacy being redirected not to manipulators, but to children raised with integrity. It ended with a mother reading to her kids under the sun, a story she wrote from memory and defiance, not bitterness. Because real justice isn't about humiliation. It's about restoration. It's the moment a name reappears on paper where it was once erased. It's the quiet knowledge that the next generation will inherit truth, not deception. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Let this story remind us, Silence is not peace when it hides injustice. Sometimes standing up once is enough to ensure you never have to bow again. And no wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you've ever felt pushed out of your own family, treated like the problem, cut out of the picture, or told to stay silent just to keep the peace, leave a comment below. I want to hear your story. Don't forget to hit like if any part of this journey felt familiar. And subscribe so you don't miss the next story, where the truth always gets the final word.